Okay, so remember last time when I was talking about how the general response from me talking about the book was like a big deal, like everyone was leaving me like, oh, you need to get into that more. So that's the whole reason I started doing this series, and I mean, I was having fun with it, and I was kind of like, when I was uploading the last episode, I was like, maybe they'll take to it, maybe they won't, maybe I got a little bit too in-depth, maybe I was too boring, and yeah, apparently I was wrong, because I got like even more responses this time, so I'm glad you guys are having fun, I'm having fun. So, two things before we get into continuing with the Inferno. Number one, did you know there was a video game based off of the Divine Comedy called Devil May... What the hell is that? Devil May Cry, right. Starting this guy with white hair, and he goes around and fights demons or something. I don't know. Just found that out today. No, I'm just kidding with you guys. I knew the game always existed. Haven't played it yet, though. I know, right? And the second thing is, I really gotta thank... if you might have noticed in the last video, I don't know if it was very apparent, but to keep it more interesting, I threw a little bit of background music into certain segments, and most of that background music was from Bleach, specifically movie 4, The Hellverse, which pretty much gives me the most badass soundtrack for talking about the Inferno ever. I mean, listen to this! Awesome, right? Okay, so yeah, that's just a couple points out of the way. Let's continue. Continuing down into the depths of hell. From limbo, we go to the second circle of lust. You like that? I'm throwing that up there now because just to keep track of where I am in the circle, because it's gonna get kind of complicated later on. So we're gonna have that to keep track. All right, so Alright, so Lust. Upon entering Lust, Virgil and Dante encounter Minos, who I originally assumed would be the Minotaur, but we actually meet him later down. Now, Minos is just kind of like this giant dude with a snake, so... I mean, I never really heard of him much before mythology. I don't know if he is from Greek mythology. If he was, then I should probably kick myself for really not have hearing of him, but I've never heard. That's the first time was in the Inferno. Anyway, the Lustful are these are the group in Hell that are like the first ones that are punished. Like the Vestibule's not technically in Hell at all, and Limbo is just kind of like sitting there and and being depressed in your own, like you were wrong in your religion and you're gonna be here for all eternity. That was kind of like a passive punishment. No, here's where shit gets real. Here's where stuff gets, eternal damnation and pain. This is where we get really into it. So basically with Lust, the ironic punishment here is basically you let your emotions control you. You become you're basically a slave to your emotion of lust. And I guess you could consider, they just say sins of the flesh in general, so I'm like adultery could probably be in here, I would assume. Any kind of lust-based sin, anything revolving around that. Anybody that's unable to control their physical urges. It's really funny talking about this now, because I know so many people that would be just, that are just like this, not technically obsessed with lust, but just damn, I really need to go get laid. Basically like that. Maybe because, all my friends are, teenagers, so that might be a thing. But, I'm just saying, it seems a little bit more odd that I'm talking about this now. And the punishment for lust, because you were being controlled by your emotions, you were kind of a slave to your emotions, for the rest of eternity, you spend in a massive storm, in a massive hurricane of great winds, probably winds higher than you can imagine, or fathom, probably basically a massive hurricane. So that's your eternity. You're basically a leaf in the wind. And a few noteworthy people that are in the lust level of hell are Cleopatra, Helen of Troy, Achilles, and Paris. Now, Paris is interesting because the only Paris I ever remember reading is the Paris from Romeo and Juliet. And then I had to realize that the Divine Comedy was probably written about 300 years before Shakespeare was even born. So, probably not around the same time period, probably not the same Paris. I just found that a nice little, comparison there. Alright, so moving on from Lust, our next stop is Gluttony. Now, if you've never read the Inferno, you're probably thinking that each level of the Inferno is corresponding to one of the 7 deadly sins. No, actually, only this level and the 2 levels after this have any of the 7 deadly sins, and the one before it, Lust. We don't get into the whole 7 deadly sins as actually a order until Purgatory, because that's the whole basis of Purgatory, being centered around the 7 deadly sins. And You know what? I was going to talk about this, but I'm probably going to go off on a rant if I get into this subject, so we'll just hold off on that until I get to Purgatory. But, okay, so for Gluttony. Now, Gluttony is where Cerberus lies, and if you don't know who Cerberus is, badass three-headed dog that will rip you to fucking shreds. Don't screw with them, basically, is the deal. And it's funny because in the Divine Comedy, they refer to as Cerberus as the Great Worm, which... Does this look like a worm to you? No, not really. Kind of looks like a dog, a badass dog. I may be referring to maybe the necks, because that was just like a fan image. In the actual image of the Divine Comedy, the illustration, Cerberus is depicted with maybe a longer neck. So maybe that is. And the ironic part here is, because you lived your life in gluttony, you were basically having an overabundance of pleasure. In hell, you have an overabundance of displeasure, or the opposite of food. That's what it is. That, like, something that's disgusting. You're probably knowing where I'm coming from on this. So yeah, you basically get rained on by icy cold slush and just slop for all eternity. I mean, they don't specifically say it's shit, because that's actually another level later on. There's like 3 separate levels that have to deal with bathing in some kind of filth, but this is one of them where you're basically lying on the ground for eternity, getting rained on by filth and disgusting slop, while a 3-headed dog guards you and probably would occasionally come by and take a couple bites out of you, I would assume. I mean, Cerberus, I mean, he has to have something to do. He just can't lie around sleeping all day, although my dog probably could. Actually, another point to make up here is how exactly Virgil and Dante are passing through this. If you've never read the book, you're probably even when I read the book, I was a little bit privy to this information, where you might be thinking like Dante and Virgil have like some kind of, you know, bubble over them, or some kind of protecting from the rest of, like, they're not actually interacting with the environment, they're just passing through it. No, you'd be wrong. They are bare to the elements. They're dealing with, I mean, they're getting as filthy as everybody else is. The one exception is they're not the ones being punished. Because Virgil's with him, Dante is allowed to pass through. In fact, there's several instances in the book where like somebody comes up to them and asks, like, what the hell's he doing here? What the fuck's going on here? And he's like, oh, well, it's cool. I'm just taking this guy for a hike through hell, purgatory, and heaven, kind of like a spiritual enlightenment kind of deal. And he's like, why? What? Okay, whatever. I don't care. Just don't mess up my, you know, my severed head mountain. I'm trying to, you know, get it just right. You can just pass onward. So they are still part of the environment. They do have to pass over certain obstacles, and Cerberus is one of the obstacles. And how they get past Cerberus is Virgil fills its mouth with mud, and they just walk on by him. There's a bunch of things like that throughout the entire book where they get past certain things with weird methods. So yeah, this Virgil walks up to Cerberus. You know, Cerberus might like growl at him, and Virgil just shoves mud into its mouth. It's like, okay, let's walk. Let's get out of here. Come on. He's cool. I don't know. Okay, so moving on to the 4th level of hell, greed. The avarice, the prodigal. I want everything for me because I'm greed. Oh, in all seriousness, he was a badass character from Full Metal Alchemist. I mean, I'm just reading the manga Full Metal Alchemist, and I just read past the part with like the greed arc. That was a pretty cool arc. Okay, so the avarice, the greed, basically. This is very much akin to Greek mythology, if nothing else, because the punishment here is actually a punishment that has been shared by a Greek legend of Sisyphus. And if you don't know who Sisyphus is, Sisyphus was the guy where, I forget the whole point of this story. I forget what he did. But he did something to piss off the gods so much. And that's nothing, you never want to do that. You never want to piss off the gods of Roman mythology, because in that religion, in the mythology of Greek, the gods are actually up there, and the gods are actually listening to you. So if you piss them off sufficiently, they will actually come down and ram a lightning bolt up your ass. They actually do stuff. Like if you go outside and to whatever gods you believe in, like if I were to slander God right now, the Christian God, probably nothing would happen to me right at this instant. Maybe in the next life, you know, something would happen, but nothing probably would happen in this exact instance. In the Roman mythology, if you slander Zeus or something, you'll actually get probably punished for it. And Sisyphus was punished for whatever he did by being forever, he's forever pushing a boulder up the mountain, and the mountain gets, like, you know, more vertical as he gets up. So at some point, he can never get up the mountain. At some point, the boulder is going to be overcome by his weight and the angle of the mountain, and the boulder is going to fall to the bottom again. Sisyphus has to walk all the way back down and push the boulder up all over again, and this is continuous. And if he ever were to stop, Zeus would probably step on him or something. I don't know. There's probably some reason why he doesn't just stop. So, like Sisyphus, that's what the greed have to do. They were so obsessed with money and material goods, so they're forever bound to pushing a boulder up the mountain. So I guess it's symbolic of being crushed by your greed, I guess, would be a way you can kind of look at it, being like that. Oh, I forgot to mention, the fourth circle greed, it's guarded by Plutus. Plutus I don't know much about, also along with Minos, kind of just a dude, kind of like an old straggly man just hanging out on a cliff, kind of. I think like Virgil like looks at him, like Dante's like, why is that homeless man there? Oh, no, just keep walking, don't mind him. Don't give him any change, he's lost cause there. And now we come to the fifth circle, Wrath. And this is also the last circle of the first half of Hell, I should say. I forgot to mention this, that Hell is basically divided into two sections. There's passive sin and active sin. Passive sin is, would be, lust, gluttony, and greed. Not technically something that you really considered sinful when you're doing it. Like for gluttony, for example. I mean, you're not sitting there shoveling food in your mouth and you're thinking about, like, oh, I'm sinning, yeah, I'm going to hell for this. Or, greed, the same way. It's just something that you did in your life. You're not really considering it that much. I might be off on this definition, by the way. And after the fifth circle, after we get into active sin territory, this is the kind of the sin, like we deal with like murder and fraud and that kind of stuff, like acts that you commit that are actually pretty damn bad. So I should say that these punishments are not nearly as bad as when we get to the second half of Hell. But Wrath is basically broken up into two parts. It's on one level, but it's two people that are being punished on this level. We have the Wrathful and the Sullen. And the Wrathful are basically forced to fight on muddy banks of the river Styx. The river Styx runs directly through Wrath. The circle of Wrath runs right through it, and this is where Phalangius is, who is the ferryman here. So on the coast of this muddy river, the Wrathful, because this is like quite simple, because they spent their life in wrath and rage and anger, they spend it, fighting against each other. And the Sullen are actually inside of the river Styx itself. They are embedded in the river Styx, and they're basically stuck in this mud for all eternity. It's not anything. I think it just says black mud. So even if it's just mud, still you're spent head, like sometimes even over your head, because you do like choke on it. Hell kind of does this thing where it reincorporates the regeneration properties, because you can't die. So whatever punishment you get, no matter how bad it is, most likely, even if you do damage to your body, it'll just regenerate and you can deal with it all over again. So basically these people spend the rest of eternity choking on mud, while the Wrathful fight on the coast for all eternity. So then Virgil and Dante encounter Phalangius, who is the ferryman, who takes them over the river Styx, where they actually have to cross and pass over all the Sullen that are like in the river itself. And that's when they finally emerge on the other side and they cross over the wall of Dis. And Dis is the active sin portion of Hell. This is where like shit got real in the passive sin territory. This is where it goes way beyond like any kind of comprehension. This is where it gets really bad, because Dis is essentially a massive city, and all like the major sinners are inside of the city walls. So that's good. We got done with the four circles, lust through Wrath, so that's pretty good. Next time we're going to be getting into Dis itself, the major sin territory, and this is where, also you might be thinking like we're breezing through Hell pretty quickly. It's 9 circles and we've already taken out 5. I mean, we're over halfway there. No. The next circle, Heresy, that might not take too long, because that's only just Heresy. But after that, circles 7, 8, and 9, those are the ones that are all broken up into sub-levels, and each sub-level serves a different purpose. So there's like an overlying theme, and then they're broken up into certain punishments for that team. Circle number 7 is broken up into 3 parts. Circle number 8 is broken up into 10. And we'll get to how that works. And finally we have circle 9 that's broken up into 4. So, You know, I'm probably gonna cover 6 and 7 next video, and then I might have to do a whole just special video on Circle 8, Balagia, because that's just that's something else altogether. It has kind of like its own rules and everything down there. And then Circle 9, I could probably cover another video. And so if all is right, then probably 3 more videos. So 5 videos for Inferno. Purgatory shouldn't take that long. And Heaven should also not be that long. So Hell is definitely the longest. Okay, everyone, thanks for watching. Tekking 101, Tekking 1001. See you guys.